Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
Globally, indigenous peoples are at the forefront of environmental and land defense. It is estimated that in 2021 alone, about 40% of murdered environmental defenders were from indigenous communities, making up a disproportionately high percentage of environmental injustices. In this context, Cultural Survival interviewed Michel Forst, the first person to hold the mandate of the UN Special Rapporteur on Environmental Defenders, the first international mechanism in the world dedicated to protecting environmental defenders. Rapporteur Forst began his tenure in June 2022. He has spoken about his role and jurisdiction, mainly on how indigenous peoples can use and benefit from his mandate.
My name is Michel Forst. I'm a French citizen, and I've been appointed in 2022 as the first UN Special Rapporteur on environmental defenders under the Aarhus Convention. Maybe I should start briefly by explaining what is this Aarhus Convention and to which and to whom it would apply. So that's 25 years ago, states decided that they would decide to create what they call sort of environmental democracy. So they decided to work together to establish this democracy by establishing a new convention, which was adopted in Aarhus in Denmark. And it was based on 3 pillars. The first is access to information, meaning that when a state or a company would like to develop a new activity which have an impact on the environment of people, then they would have the duty, the obligation to inform all communities, families, people who would be affected by this project in all languages, meaning that the information is not only accessible, but should be provided by the state. So that's a duty of the state. And the second pillar, which is very much related with the first, is public participation. Again, meaning that when indigenous people, communities, families would be affected by a project in their environment, then state or the company would have a duty, an obligation to consult them, and community would have the right to say no. Of course, the no is not binding, but at least they would express themselves and say why they do not want the project or why and under which condition the project would be agreed by the communities. And the third pillar, which was very new at that time, is access to justice, meaning that when rights have been affected or violated, then people, communities, individuals would have to go to the justice system, either administrative justice or judicial justice, and seek redress and reparation. And it works pretty well. Yeah. This convention has created also what we call a compliance committee, which is there to receive complaints when states or companies would not comply with the main provision of the convention. And in addition to that, because they saw that those who are the most at risk are environmental defenders and climate activists, states have decided recently, 2 years ago, to create a new mandate under the form of a special rapporteur on environmental defenders with a view to respond immediately. The name is Rapid Response Mechanism under the form of a special rapporteur. And the idea is that when I would receive a complaint coming from a community, indigenous groups, families or individuals, then I would take action immediately using the same working methods as other rapporteurs. So far, that's a universal convention ratified by 47 states, including the EU. But when it comes to companies, then that's different. Of course, the mandate is working in all states that are party to the convention. But let's say when a company based in one of the countries party to the Aarhus Convention is operating abroad, like for instance, a Spanish company would operate in Latin America or elsewhere and doing harm to defenders, then defenders from those countries could also seek protection for that mandate. Another example, if a company based in UK would do harm to defenders in Asia, then defenders from those countries would go to my mandate to seek protection and reparation. That's precisely why states have decided to create this extra territorial scope of the mandate that I explained that, of course, the mandate is very much related to the parties to the Earth Convention, mainly the countries in the big Europe up to Mongolia. But of course, as you know, those who are the most dangerous for communities, for indigenous people, are mostly companies. And that's why when companies are based in one of the countries which is party to the convention and would operate abroad, then defenders from those countries could also seek protection from a mandate. So it's a universal mandate, provided that we find a connection between those who are affected and the perpetrators. Could be the state or companies. And if you see that there would be a company based in one of the countries based of the Earth Convention, then of course defenders could seek protection from their mandate. It's very new. I've started to work with my team recently, only in October last year, and we start receiving complaints coming from other countries, from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia as well. So it's a new mandate, and we need to raise awareness on this new mandate. And we all recognize that those who are the most at risk are environmental defenders. In fact, number of killings target, in fact, environmental defenders. And most attacks are targeted to communities or local defenders that simply try to protect their environment and the land. And I was struck when traveling to Peru, to Colombia, to Africa, to Asia as well, to see that, most communities face the same challenge. In fact, they see all of a sudden companies investing their piece of land and trying to dig holes and target, in fact, families or defenders. And if they want to protest, then they are facing threats and attacks not only by the companies themselves, but also by security forces, because they have the link and the connection between those companies and powerful actors like, of course, governments, but also sometimes mafias. As I said, that's a new mandate and with new working methods. And the main difference with other rapporteurs is that this mandate is based on a legally binding instrument, the Earth Convention, while other rapporteurs have been created simply by a resolution from the Council in Geneva, which is not at all binding, while for me this is binding, meaning that if states don't comply with the provision of the convention, then they would be penalized. And again, if they would not comply with my recommendation regarding threats to defenders, then they would also be penalized, including companies. That's a very new mandate with new working method, with new tools. What I'm doing is that I'm trying to reach out to those who are affected, and my staff will investigate with the support of UN bodies and NGOs the reality of the threats, the veracity of the testimonies, and then if we understand that the threats are real, then immediately, that's why it's called a rapid response mechanism, immediately would send questions to the states asking why and how, and if they have investigated already on the threats. And I could also continue by doing country visits, and I'm not obliged to wait for receiving an invitation from the state. I could decide myself, invite myself to a country to investigate when I see that there is a pattern of attacks against defenders, and then start while in the capital to discuss with the government. Of course, when life is at risk, then we cannot wait 6 days. Then I would issue immediate measures like relocation measures, for instance. When defenders need to be relocated elsewhere, then we could also use the usual tool to relocate defenders outside of the country to make sure that they would be at least safe for a couple of weeks, the time for me to investigate further on the risk that they're facing. My concern is that indigenous people sometimes or very often do not decide to become defenders. They are defenders out of a necessity because they are attacked. In fact, they are under pressure. So they decide to become defenders simply because they defend a piece of land which belongs to them. And that's their cosmovision, in fact. I remember I was traveling to Mongolia and then to Latin America. Many told me that the earth is not earth, that's more than that. The water is not only water, it's more. The forest is not forest, it's more than forest. That's a sort of cosmovision that I try to defend. And I'm there also to support those who are the most at risk. And for me, clearly, indigenous people are the most at risk currently. That's why together with other rapporteurs, we're trying to do our best to inform states, but also to take measures to protect defenders. Protection is good, but it's not enough. We should also be able to prevent the risk to occur. And that's why raising awareness on the possibilities offered by this new mandate is also a way for me to prevent states and companies to attack defenders. First of all, I can't do nothing without receiving a complaint. Put a complaint to my mandate. It's very simple. You go to the website and you click on the link, and then there is a very, very simple form by which you can put your complaint, explain your situation. You don't need to provide tons of reports. Simply tell your story, in fact. And my staff will contact you just to ask questions to make sure that the risks that we're facing are real, and then we'll start the process by using all the possibilities offered by the mandate to target the state or the company. I'm using all tools at my disposal, including what we call quiet diplomacy. That is, it's not public and sometimes more efficient to talk directly to the top of the company to explain that if they don't take action, if they don't redress, then I'm going to go public. And sometimes to see the mere fact that you are threatening them to go public, that's a deterrent for them. Having their names in a UN report, that has huge implications. So simply naming the name, that's sometimes sufficient to raise awareness, and then companies would come to me asking questions. Why are you targeting us? What can we do to redress the situation? As you know, big companies are big machineries, and you cannot stop a project all of a sudden. It takes time. So states should first understand, then they need to talk with their lawyers to discuss what sort of measures they would take, and it start a process. But simply by deciding to start a process, we can expect that after a couple of months and sometimes years, because it's a long process, things will change in a country. Of course, for defenders, it's not rapid enough. They would expect to have immediate measures or a project being stopped. But we need to understand that when it comes to companies, it's very a long process, in fact. As I explained, the convention has been ratified only by 47 states, meaning that it applies also for companies from those states. But we know that other countries are also sometimes dangerous, like Chinese companies or some African companies or companies in other countries. So the more countries would ratify the convention, the more effective the tool will be. And of course, the limitation also the territorial scope of my mandate. As I explained, I would firstly target defenders inside the Aarhus region. But of course, when it comes to companies, I would have the possibility to explore other means. But if you take the fact that companies based in Canada or in Australia or in the US are sometimes very dangerous for defenders and for communities, because Canada, the US, or Australia are not a party to the Arts Convention, I can't do nothing with those countries. So the more information we provide, the more activists, the more lobbying we do on those countries, the more effective the mandate will be, hopefully. We have, in fact, effective protection mechanisms that work pretty well, including mechanisms that have been established by communities themselves. I remember that in Latin America, I saw very effective protection mechanism established by local communities, by indigenous communities. They have like indigenous guards, only armed with batons, that are effective to protect their communities. In countries where there is a national mechanism, sometimes you see that mechanisms are able to provide bullet-proof jackets, panic buttons, armed vehicles, bodyguards to defenders. Sometimes also you see that national institutions are also very useful to protect defenders. Sometimes they are able to establish early warning mechanism, that is to detect when an attack is about to occur against a community, and to alert the police or security forces that they could come before the attacks would start. So you see in many countries different situations, but the most effective protection mechanism that I've seen are in Latin America. in Colombia, in Honduras, in Mexico. Sometimes states have decided to work with special rapporteurs to try and strengthen the mechanism, to learn lessons from other mechanisms, to share experiences, to make sure that those mechanisms would be more effective. But the main lesson is that you cannot do nothing without first starting to discuss with communities. They are the one who know better than us what to do and what to do to protect them. So no mechanism could work without the participation of indigenous people and local communities. Those who are the most at risk are those who are living in remote places where there is no access to internet, and for those communities because they are not able to target or to send me information, I can do nothing. So the best would be for them to come closer to local NGOs that could also do the work for them. Sometimes I don't need to receive a complaint from the victim themselves, but from an NGO. That is, if an NGO is close to a community which is affected, then the NGO could fill the form for the community. And then I would investigate and start to discuss with the NGO to make sure that the community would give their consent to be protected. Because again, without the consent, I can do nothing. So in all occasions, we could find a way to communicate with those who are affected and don't have an access to internet to reach out to me. My last message would be simply to say that you are not alone. You have allies, sometimes strong allies. My team and myself would like to work with you to know you better. So the more you can also do to send me information on your activities, the more we'll be able to protect you. So don't be, sometimes I know that it's difficult for you to reach out to the UN, but through NGOs, through other communities, you can reach out to me and I will make my best to protect you.
For more information on indigenous rights, visit www.cs.org/rights and also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook.